Morning, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. And out here at the Pathfinder School in Southeast Ohio, we teach lots of classes from basic survival, intermediate and advanced survival, bushcraft 101. We teach medicinal edible plants, intensive navigation, wilderness first aid, ropes and riggings, and lots of other classes that may interest you in 2025. You can find those on our website at selfrelianceoutfitters.com under the training tab. And we look forward to seeing you in 2025. In today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk more about bedrolls in general, and we're going to deconstruct a few bedrolls of mine. I had some questions in the video about four-season bedrolls and things like that and how bedrolls change seasonally, and I kind of wanted to talk that through with you today a little bit, show you some examples of bedrolls that I use, kind of deconstruct those things, and also look at a very old bedroll from the early 1900s from the Abercrombie and Fitch catalog that I have to show you that bedrolls are nothing new, and they've been used in camping environments and for spending time in the woods for a long, long time. Well before that, you know, cowboys, Civil War soldiers, soldiers of the Revolutionary War, all carried bedrolls of some sort with them lots of times on the march or on the trail. The Abercrombie and Fitch bedroll that I have fits very well into that sporting category of the early 1900s and classic camping era. And that's why I wanted to kind of show it to you today so that you understand how bedrolls were thought about and the components of a bedroll and what they have in common with bedrolls that we use to this day. So stay with me and we'll get started, guys. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is look at this older bedroll. And this bedroll, I'll put some pictures in this video, was pictured in Abercrombie and Fitch's 1910 catalog, I believe it was. And this was a bedroll that was sold several different ways with add-ons. But what you can see is it's got a waterproof layer on the back side. I'm not sure what this material is. It's got a name that's in the ad itself. But it's a waterproof material and it folds out, and you've got basically this flat portion, which is about 2.5 feet, and it's got a drawstring on it, has 4 grommet holes in it so that it could be folded over and become like a storm roof so that you could lay out in this thing, and this just basically kept rain off your head by dragging this thing over and staking it up with a stick or something like that. And then it also protected the entire bedroll when it rolled up into this. And then you could draw the ends of this thing down around the bedroll to kind of protect it a little bit better. It does have one little patch on it, looks like right here, but it's in pretty good shape for its age. To be honest with you, it's usable to this day. It might need a little bit of retreatment on the back side. This stuff's pretty well cracked and worn, but again, you know, 1910, okay. So the important part of this is understanding the inside and seeing what this is. Basically what you've got here is there's no zips on this thing, it's all snaps, and that's important to understanding the age of the piece, because zippers were something that really didn't come in until about the 1940s, okay? So something like this that's only snaps and no zips kind of helps you age a piece like this if you can't find an ad for it or something like that. But you basically just have a lightweight canvas sleeping bag that has a cushioned bottom on it. So you've got squares of cushioning here on the inside, and I would assume that there's some kind of a downfill or something in here that's probably, you know, completely compressed by now at this point at its age, right? But it was something that was to protect you from the ground and give you that battle of conduction. And then you basically just had a full sleeping bag at the bottom with a closed-in foot box that opened up so that you could sleep in it. And then it had snaps that would snap up on the side all the way down so that you could close it up if you wanted to a closed bag pretty much. And there was plenty of room in there. You can see the way this thing's built, they were pretty smart about it, because even if you snap this over, there's plenty of room here to get underneath here with a blanket or several blankets, even with it snapped up without it being really tight. So they understood how insulation worked and how loose layers of insulation were beneficial back then. And the way this was sold was, it was sold either by itself like this or with like 1, 2, or 3 blankets. And the blankets were different thicknesses, so you can combine them with this bedroll for a winter style camp if that's what you chose to do. Now, how well this insulated you from the ground when it was new, I don't know. But they did have air mattresses in that time period. I have one, had one before my house burnt down. I had a J.C. Higgins air mattress from the 1920s that actually blew up with a bicycle pump. It was a rubber air mattress that blew up with a bicycle pump. So you could actually put something like that in here or underneath it as well as all the wool blankets. And the wool blankets would go inside here to provide you with layers of insulation. But remember what we talked about, the bottom layer is what's really important here, right? Because you need 3 times as much below you as you need above you. So if you could take care of the bottom part of this, you wouldn't need much of a blanket underneath this to give you a pretty comfortable sleep depending on the weather. But something like this would have been set up or carried to sleep in say a summertime environment, because this is light canvas. You had a small pad here you could lay on the ground, and it rolled up fairly small. The diameter is about like that when it's completely rolled up if you don't have a blanket inside of it. If you added a blanket to it to make it like a 2-season, or a thicker blanket or 2 to make it 3-season, or maybe 3 blankets if you wanted to make it 4-season, it was easy enough to do that with this bedroll. So it was a very versatile piece of gear. And this overhang or awning roof over the top of it that could be staked out and then stood up over the top or hung out over the top would have given you protection from elements and things like that, but it allowed it to breathe so that you weren't getting condensation inside the bedroll. This is a very, very innovative piece of gear from a time period when we think, things were more primitive than they are. They had figured out very well what it took to sleep in the woods, and that's really the mark of a true woodsman, is how well he can sleep, not how well he can suffer. So bear that in mind when you're watching videos of how to sleep in the woods. So when this was rolled up by itself, you had something like this. Probably, about 2 feet wide, somewhere in that neighborhood, and about 6 inches in diameter, and that's with no blanket in there. You could easily put one wool blanket in there and have yourself a very comfortable sleep, even into, in early spring, early summer, definitely would have been very comfortable, okay? So that's the basis of a bedroll. Now let's talk about how bedrolls are put together and kind of how I put them together, and then even some modern bedrolls like the Born bedroll today, and how it's very similar to this bedroll from the past. Okay, so this is one of my bedrolls for like 3 seasons, okay? And it's based on gum blankets. Gum blankets were something that was very traditionally used, especially all the way up into the 1900s for sure, prior to the Second World War. And they were available all the way back to, pre-Civil War era. So if you're looking for something very traditional, a gum blanket would have been something that would have been very traditional. This one happens to be a poncho as well. So it's set up so that you could use it for a poncho as well as a gum blanket, but I use it for like the basic ground cloth. Now you could also set this up to where you had your shelter system over the top of this, like your oilcloth tarp or something like that, to protect your bedroll and then set up as your shelter. We'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. Now this one has a tump line on it that I hand wove. It's got a nice wide strap on it, 2 tails that are braided down that can be tied around it. And we'll talk about carry on these as well a little bit, because I did a video on properly carrying a bedroll in a tump line configuration. I also want to show you a way to carry a bedroll like this in a backpack configuration. I'm actually working on some things right now to make some backpack style straps for a bedroll, but I can show you how to makeshift that very easily from rope or webbing as well. So this one, again, is based on gum blankets, okay? So you've got pretty much a gum blanket poncho in here. And you can see that it's tied up. Got a bunch of stink bugs in it, which is nothing new. All right. So you can see that this one is set up so that it's tied up here and here to hold it together before you roll it up. These stink bugs out here. All right. And it's held together with square knots. So we'll just capsize those square knots, pull that out, and we'll just tie this over so it doesn't go anywhere. Same thing with this one. Let's divide it in half and tie it in half real quick so it doesn't go anywhere. And we'll do that all the way down to open this up. And this is exactly what I would do if I were sleeping with this bedroll in the woods, okay? Basically, this gum blanket poncho would become my ground mat, okay? All right, so now, let's pull that off. what you can see here is that this one is based on an oilcloth tarp. So you've got a shelter system in here if you wanted it as well. You could pull this thing apart and use it for a shelter. And this one is a Tent Smith tarp, okay? And I think this is an 8x8. But you could just fold this out if you wanted to and sleep on it just like it is. And you can see there's a flour sack in here. And I use those a lot for pillow sacks. I'll stuff them with clothes or debris or whatever, fold them over, and those become my pillow sack, all right, for a pillow at night. And an old flour sack like that or an old cornmeal sack works great for that, okay? And you can just roll that up in your bedroll. Doesn't take up a lot of room, and it's perfect for that. Now, the way this is set up, it's in 3 layers. You got 1, 2, and then your 3rd layer is here, right? And then you also have a wool blanket inside here that is set up the same way. It opens up just like this, and that's very typical of the way wool blankets were set up in bedrolls, all right? So when you crawl into this thing, you actually have the layer underneath you. You have the wool blanket, and you have 2 layers of wool blanket over you, 2 layers of oilcloth over you, and you have, but what I've got in here, you can see, I've got a foam pad in here. There's just a closed cell foam pad. So this protects you along with the wool. So you've got a layer of wool here, you've got the foam pad, you have the oilcloth, and you have the gum blanket. Now, is that gonna protect you in the middle of the winter? Probably not. You would probably wanna put some kind of a debris down at the bottom before you laid this out and lay this on top of the debris, or put a bigger, heavier air mattress in here for 4 seasons. But this is a very typical setup of a bedroll, and it's a very good bedroll setup that works out really, really well. And what you can see is that it's fairly compact when it's rolled up in comparison to some things. I mean, you could roll this thing up, and you saw it rolled up with the tump line around it. It's not much bigger than probably a 30-liter dry bag would be in the end. So you could definitely carry this, would be almost the same size as carrying a 30, 35-liter backpack. If you put backpack straps on this, it would be very similar, and this would be your sleeping arrangement. You would put your clothes in here as well that you're gonna sleep in at night, spare socks, a toque cap, something like that, sleeping cap, maybe a pair of wool finger gloves or something like that if you wanted to, and then obviously a change of base layers, and you'd be ready to rock and roll. And this would be a perfect bedroll for that. And then you could, at the end, put a few things in the bedroll as well that you didn't want to carry outside your body in like a haversack. So when I was putting this back together, I would probably put my clothing right in this area because I plan to take this wool blanket and fold it over the top anyway inside the actual oilcloth. So that would be my protection and give me an envelope to put my gear in if I were going to put any gear or clothing inside here at the same time. And then I would just fold this back over the top, just like this. And it would be ready to roll it back up. So these tie outs here that I've got on this gum blanket, all those really are for is to keep this thing closed up and keep its shape when you're rolling it up, okay? So I just get those evened up all the way down. Then obviously it's just a matter of rolling this thing up from front to back. Just to give you kind of a point of reference here, okay? There's your bedroll, and there's a 20-liter dry bag. So it's a little bigger than a 20-liter dry bag as far as length, and maybe just a little bigger around the diameter. So like I said, a 30, 35-liter dry bag is about comparable to the size of this. As far as a backpack goes, 30, 35 liters, that's what you're carrying, okay? Okay, so let's talk about adding backpack-style straps to this, and then adding a couple things to this bedroll that will be fairly easy to get at on the trail, but we won't necessarily have to carry them on our person because we can tuck them into this bedroll. So the first thing we want to do is we want to unroll this bedroll and kind of start over with the rolling, okay? So I'm going to roll it out, and we're going to start over with that. Because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of rope, and this piece is about 3 fathoms or 18 feet, all right? And I'm going to find the center of this piece of rope, just like this, and find the center line. And I'm just going to put a figure of 8 knot in that, right in the center, kind of just like that. And give myself a loop on the end. And I'm going to lay that in the bedroll just like this. And then I'm going to re-roll the bedroll with that knot sticking out the end like that, okay? So there's my figure of 8, and here's my tails, okay? And I'm gonna roll this up. Now, when I get to the end of this, we're going to compress it down, and we're gonna use another piece of rope, okay? And we're gonna leave this other one be for a minute. Remember, this is gonna be the bottom, all right? And this is gonna be the top as we're doing this. So now we're gonna take another piece of rope, and it's the same length, just to keep things easy, but it's a smaller diameter rope. And all I'm gonna do with this is I'm going to take this thing and tie it from the top to the bottom. And I'm gonna come around here just like this. And I'm gonna tie a timber hitch in this rope, okay? And to tie a timber hitch in this rope, all I'm gonna do is come around here like this, wrap it around here, around the rope itself, okay? And take that tail and run it through there about 4 or 5 times, just like this. What that's gonna allow me is gonna allow me a loop that I can draw down on. That's going to draw all of this tight, just like this, okay? And then I'm gonna come around to the top side here, drag all this rope around just like this, and I'm gonna put a 1/2 hitch in here, just like this. And I'm putting that 1/2 hitch pretty much right here along this seam. And I wanna even that up, get that an even length down this line. And I'm only giving myself about 6 inches there to tighten up, okay? Just like that. Now you can see I'm running right along this seam here, okay? Now anything I want to put inside here that's bulky, I'm going to put in here now. So one of the things I know I may want to get to on the trail is my skillet. So I'm going to shove my skillet down in here right like this before I tighten this down any further. And I'm going to come right down over top here, move this down, and cinch it right down over the top of that skillet, just like that. And come around the whole thing again, just like this. And yank another 1/2 hitch in there. And I'm gonna shimmy that down to where it's even. Get those 1/2 hitches lined up down this blanket, just like this. Tightening it as I go and cranking down on it, okay? Now I'm to the bottom of this thing. I'm gonna put one more tie in it the same way. Just like this. And this one, now I've got my skillet wrapped in here. It's not gonna come out. It's not gonna be against my back. It's gonna be to the outside. And I've got it tied in so it can't come out, but I can get to it if I need to, all right? Then I'm just gonna come around with this again, and I'm gonna come back through this loop and use that for a toggling device, just like that. And put a slippery 1/2 hitch in the whole thing, just like this, okay? At the bottom. Again, this is the bottom, right? Then I can just tuck these tails in, just like this. And wrap this one around a couple of times, just like this, so it can't come undone. And I've got 1/2 hitch, or timber hitch, 1/2 hitch, 1/2 hitch, 1/2 hitch tied off, okay? And my skillet is tucked in right there. Now, if there was something else I wanted to put in here, like a saw or an axe, I'd put them in before I fold it up, before I tie it down. But I could put a saw and an axe in here very easily, straight up and down this thing, and you can see a full-size buck saw is about the same length. I call that bedroll length. That's how I like my axes. And if you look at this axe, same thing. bedroll length. All of my cook irons, things like that, are built to bedroll length. That's why they're built that way, so that they can be slid down inside here and be accessible from the bedroll and carried on the back, okay? If I want to, I can just slide an axe down inside here just like this. Whoops, yep. This is the top, this is the bottom. I can slide that axe right down inside there just like that. There we go. And that's plenty accessible to me on the trail. And it's on the outside of the pack now. If I wanted to, I could put the saw there, or I could put the saw inside that flap. Either one would work fine. Or I may have a smaller folding saw that's in my haversack, and I'm just keeping an axe on standby for busting up firewood in camp on a cold winter's night. Now, we've got our figure 8 down here at the bottom. We're gonna flip this whole thing over just like this. We're gonna pull these 2 straps down just like this, and these are gonna come through this figure 8 just like this. And now these are gonna become our backpack straps. So we're gonna give ourselves a little slack here so that we can get it on, even up our tails, and just tie an overhand knot in that dude, just like that. All right, now we're good. So now you've got this, all right? You've got 2 straps, and you've got this thing like a backpack. If you want to, and you've got enough room, you can use that bottom part of the tail to give yourself a waist strap as well, and I'll show you that. And it can also be changed over really quickly to a single over the shoulder if you want to, just like this, on either side, and then split into a backpack when you need it that way to carry it more comfortably. Now, if you want to use this as a waist belt and backpack straps, take that figure 8 knot out of here and just leave yourself a loop right there. Take these and drop them through the loop, and then cinch everything up tight, just like this, to the bottom on the back side. Remember, this is the front, this is the back. It doesn't hurt anything to compress that a little bit so that you got kind of a flat spot against your back. What you don't want to do is twist these ropes. All right, that's the tricky part. Now, getting this on in this configuration is a little more difficult because you've got ropes you got to control that aren't tied off. Now, this situation with the waist belt is much more comfortable. It doesn't flop around as much on your back, and it's easier for you to carry because some of the weight's distributed to your hips, okay? The trick to this is getting into it. Now, the best way to do that is to take this thing and put 1 strap over your shoulder and keep the 2 straps in your hand at the bottom. Reach through and put the other strap on your shoulder, as I find it here. And then kind of pull things down a little at a time, just like that. And then once you get to there, you just lift up and pull to get it adjusted on your back where you want it. Once you get adjusted on your back, left over right, right over left, a little square knot there that you can easily capsize to get it undone, and you're ready to rock and roll. You've got a comfortable backpack that's got your entire shelter system, your tools, and some of your cook implements and your change of clothes on your back, and you're ready to go. Okay, so this is more of what I would call a 4-season bedroll. And it's based around a 6x8 Tent Smith's shelter tarp. So this is meant to be a shelter system and a bedroll. But what separates this from a 3-season bedroll or 2-season bedroll is only one thing. We're going to talk about that. We're going to unroll it today. And I've got a set of badger claw straps on this one, and a real good set of bedroll straps. I like these really well. The easy carry system. Okay, now we open this up and roll it out. You can see it's really not that much wider or lengthwise than the other bedrolls we've looked at. However, it is thicker, all right, bigger around. And the reason for that is, on the inside of this one, you have not only the wool blankets, you also have the flour sack pillow and things like that. You have a cover here that's made out of tick material that actually has the Pathfinder air mattress inside of it, okay? And we'll open this up real quick. This is just a protective cover that makes it look more traditional. It's not necessary whatsoever, to be honest with you. This is something that you would stuff with browse. This is called a browse bag, okay? And it's got, again, the Pathfinder air mattress in it, which has got an R value of about 5.7. You blow this thing up. Are you comfortable, Zon? Are you comfortable? Don't be clawing this thing. When you blow this thing up, there's no more comfort in the woods than this, I can tell you. This thing blows up to about that thick, and you're not gonna feel the ground temperature when you're laying on this thing. That's really what separates a winter bedroll, a good winter bedroll, from something else, is how much ground insulation you have. You don't need a whole lot more on top of you. You know, a single wool blanket that's folded 3 ways, like the other one was, where you've got 2 layers of wool going over top of you, maybe a 3rd light wool blanket in there, a shard of some kind, like a twin. And this oilcloth, if you didn't want to make a shelter, you want to sleep directly on the ground, you could just lay this oilcloth down on the ground and sleep on top of it. And you would have a 4-season bedroll, only because of the addition of this ground insulation. Not because you've put a whole lot more stuff in it to keep you warm on top. Like I said, 3 times below what you have above is what you need for a good night's sleep in the woods. Hello. Are you in your happy place? Evidently you are. So we're gonna move the cat and roll this bedroll back up. But I want to explain to you the main difference between a 4-season and a 2-3-season bedroll is the amount of insulation you have from conduction or the ground. Okay, so the last bedroll I wanted to talk to you about was the Born Outdoor Born bedroll. And this thing is huge. There's no doubt about it. You're not carrying this thing on your back. This is something you would use with conveyance. I keep this thing in my Jeep. I'll be using this thing on a trip that's coming up in a couple weeks here. I'm doing 3 days down to Florida, 2 days back, and 4 days or 2 or 3 days in Florida while I'm there. And I'll be carrying this Born bedroll and my hammock and switching back between the two. I love this thing. It is bulky. Again, you're gonna want conveyance, but as far as a 4-season bedroll goes, I haven't found anything that will beat this as far as absolute creature comfort. If you want to talk about smoothing it, I mean, this is a huge mattress inside here. And again, that's really the separating factor with this thing is it has a Thermarest Mondo King air mattress in it. So yes, you're gonna need something to blow that air mattress up with. You're gonna have to carry with you. But once you get that Mondo King blown up, there's very little insulation over top of you. There's a down quilt and a flannel type sheet underneath that quilt. And there's a flannel cover over the mattress. Other than that, you really don't have a whole lot in here. I went over this Born bedroll on a video before. You can refer back to that video if you want to look at it. But again, you know, this is the most modern bedroll technology. I showed you 1910s bedroll technology, and the bedroll technology today is not that much different other than the ground insulation part of it. Everything else has remained pretty much the same. Several layers on top that are thin and light or are wool, and something underneath you to battle conduction. That is the key importance to bedroll camping. Okay, folks, so as you can see, you know, I've got several bedroll systems in the background here, and these are all different bedroll systems that I use for different things, different times of the year. I love sleeping in bedroll. I like sleeping in hammocks as well. I love hammocks, but bedrolls are great, in my opinion, too, if nothing else for the traditionalism of it. And I just am very comfortable sleeping on the ground. So I like bedrolls, but there are caveats to it and things you need to understand to make it comfortable, and things that are not very well explained, I don't think, on the internet today when it comes to sleeping in the woods with bedroll type systems. So I wanted to get a video out today that was more comprehensive, kind of walked you through some of the step-by-steps inside a bedroll, what it looks like, what it consists of, and how to set that up. You don't have to go out and spend a lot of money to make a good bedroll. You don't need to buy a board and bedroll. You don't need to have a great oilcloth tarp or anything like that. If you get yourself a piece of canvas and you can waterproof that canvas somewhat, or get a piece of Tyvek or something like that, get yourself a decent sleeping bag. There's nothing wrong with putting a sleeping bag in a bedroll. I can guarantee you there were guys back in the 1940s and 50s that were still using those Abercrombie style bedrolls that shoved the World War II mountain bag in those bad boys and slept like a baby, and just used that roof over the top of their head to keep the morning dew off of them or the nighttime sprinkle, and they were good to go. And you can do the same thing. You can put a sleeping bag inside a bedroll as a blanket. Open it up. Sleeping on top of the insulation doesn't do any good. You're compressing it, right? So you've got to have something that's going to create loft. And feathers and things like that, sleeping on top of them, just compress. So you need something underneath you. And then what you put on top of you is really up to you. What I would suggest is that you buy, the best ground insulation you can buy, build your bedroll around that, and then you'll have a comfortable night's sleep in the woods. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thank you.